This is a little bit different topic for me. We just wanted to do something fun and encourage people to get out in the woods, and wanted to come up with some ideas of what folks could do. So one of the things I thought about is, okay, we talk a lot about oak and oak management, and a lot of folks really aren't paying much attention to what's happening on the ground and the young trees as much as they are looking out and up. So we're going to talk a little bit about observing the young oaks and other things that you're going to see on the understory. Jamie's very familiar with this graphic, but I'd like to lay a little groundwork for why we're interested in what's happening down low. This is actually data from Southeast Ohio comparing the relationship between maple, which is mostly red maple down here, and oaks. They make up about 50% of our total canopy. So we're just comparing those two in this graphic. And you can see down here we're very oak dominated. 70% of the trees that are maple and oak, or 70% of those are oak when you look at the large ones, the 15-inch or larger. But as we go down in size, the percentage of maple increases greatly. And largely that's because maple is shade tolerant. It can grow in the shade. Another thing is that when we remove trees out of this canopy, what's there to replace them are the smaller maples, which are growing in the shade under them. They're way different tree species and the timing of them. I took this shot yesterday looking up at the canopy of a red maple and a black oak. And you can see the red maples are already fully leafed out. They took a little bit of a hit with the cold weather, but the oaks are at various stages of popping buds, and that black oak in the canopy really isn't moving along very much at all yet. Oak seedlings don't do well in heavy shade. So if you think about an oak seedling growing under that maple versus the oak I showed you, it would have a tougher time. If they have the right light conditions, 15 or so percent light, they can start to develop this large carrot root. And that gives them some resources to be able to respond if they get some additional light later. They also have buds just below the soil surface with this large root. So if a disturbance happens, a harvest, a fire, a deer browses it, whatever happens, they have the ability to resprout and have lots of resources to do so. And then finally, that bud break, which is just happening now, usually occurs after the spring fire season. So if we have an early spring fire season that knocks the tops out of our maples, they've already got resources up in the canopy, and that's separating the resources that are up there from what's in the root system. Again, the oaks have the bigger roots, so they can do better and respond and sprout quicker. And really within a growing season, this tree, if it were to burn off, would probably be 2 or 3 times as tall after one growing season than it is right there. And that tree very well may be several years old, 10 or more years old. It just sits there putting its reserves into the root. What we're looking for is a little oak seedling that's got a big, what we call a root collar diameter about the size of your thumb. Those are the ones that are established and have a really good chance of surviving. Ones much smaller than that don't have much of a chance. So if you want to encourage oaks, you really need to watch those acorn crops. When we have a good acorn crop, a lot of times we're going to have a lot of little seedlings that are going to hit the ground. Most years we don't have enough acorns, and most of them are eaten by deer and turkey and squirrels and rodents. But if we have a really good acorn crop, some of those will slip through. And if they do slip through, if we can get the conditions right, get a little more light to them, they have a chance of working their way up into the canopy and surviving. And then obviously every landowner is different. And one of the reasons I want you to go out and look in the woods, it may not mean that you're thinking about doing a big harvest over a large area, but if you had a pocket of oaks in your woods, maybe you can expand an opening that they're growing in and get them a little more light and let them help them up through the forest. So most of our woods in Southeast Ohio look a lot like this. We've got lots of layers of light in the middle. We've got dense canopies. They might be oak up here, but we've got dense canopies of a lot of times red maple, and a lot of times the ground is almost bare because there's so much shade. And if we want oaks, we need to get more canopy gaps in there so we can get this big burst of oak regeneration that can take over if we want to keep oak in our forest. So again, if you have pockets of this thick oak regeneration, there are some things you can do, and your forester can help you with that. So what I thought I'd do is a quick review on identification, and maples are opposite, which means they're paired. The leaves are going to be paired and the buds are going to be paired. And when we look at the terminal bud or at the tip of the maple, it's going to have a true terminal bud. And a lot of times there are two lateral or side buds close by. So this is a sugar maple. This is a red maple. And just the reminder, I always love this slide. If you want to remember what's opposite with the paired leaves and the paired buds and the paired branching, maple, ash, dogwood, and buckeye. Remember, mad buck. The oaks, on the other hand, have a cluster of buds at the tip. And these are all different oaks. We've got white oak, we've got black oak, we've got swamp white oak and bur oak. They all have these clusters. They look like a knuckle sandwich with different sized buds, but there's usually several, 5 at least. So in the winter months, this is what they look like. And right now, most of the buds are popping, so it's a little tougher, but you still, depending on where you are and the slope and the site conditions, you may have buds that are still closed. But as they open, you're going to see the buds start to swell, but they're these clusters. So you're going to get clusters of leaves. Also, when you look at a young oak, they tend to not have a nice straight central stem. They tend to have multiple branches and spread out. So if an oak were grown in total open conditions, it would have almost a perfectly round crown. As we zoom in, I took both these pictures of this bur oak the same day. So you might, depending on where you are in the state, you might have buds that aren't even starting to pop to buds that are starting to pop further. And this is a shot I took a couple years ago. If you look, the buds were here. This is all new growth that year. This was taken in May of a couple of years ago, and this is all new growth, and you can see how it's spreading branches in all different directions. In the chat window, anybody want to guess what kind of oak this is? Got any thoughts? See if everybody's awake. It's pretty scarlet colored, if that helps folks. Somebody have any ideas? The scarlet is a pretty good hint there. It is a red oak. It is in the red oak group. And we have the red oak that grows on our driest, some of our driest conditions in Southeast Ohio is scarlet oak. So you are correct. The one on the right is pretty common here in Southeast Ohio. It is chestnut oak, but look how different those two leaves look the same day. Color will get you a little bit. So as we zoom in on those leaves, there are some hints, and it's a little tough this time of year because those of you that know oaks know that the red oak or black oak group have bristle tips. In this scarlet oak, you can clearly see nice distinct bristles. The chestnut oak is a little deceiving. And they're somewhat hairy, some of the white oak ones. So when they're in this early stage, there'll be little tufts of hair, but they're not distinct bristles like you'll see here. So that's a chestnut oak. And I just thought I'd show you a few pictures of what some of my oaks, and honestly, it kind of caught me off guard initially. This is one oak that I probably planted 10 years ago, one of the few white oaks I could find in my woods, and it's probably getting 4.5, 5 feet tall. It's pretty well established. Unfortunately, one tree, the odds aren't very good it'll make it up the canopy. I'd love to have a patch of a bunch of these in that spot where I could get a little more light to them. But I've seen white oak in some springs that are pretty white and fuzzy, and this year they're pretty red, so it kind of is deceiving. I don't know if it has to do with our weather conditions or what, but those are white oaks. Another one that I think is a white oak, and I think we're just seeing little tufts of hair because these look more rounded to me. And then there is the only red oak I found. You can see clear, distinct bristle tips. So again, if you're out there, go out and look at the conditions. See if you can find these oaks on the ground. If you've got lots of tiny little seedlings that just started to grow out of the acorn this year, give them some time. If you can get them a little more light, hopefully you can get them to be a little bit bigger. And then also look for some of these competitors. These are the two maples that are very common in Southeast Ohio. And sorry, Eric, but I let a little honeysuckle, I think, slip through in the picture on the left. But this is sugar maple. Large teeth without fine teeth between. This one's red maple, which is the one we're most concerned about. It will just get established and take over our woods. And as folks harvest timber, especially if they're not working with the forester to plan for the future, we're shifting our forest heavily to red maple down here because of that. And just as trees age out and start to die, the maple is filling in. So it's going to take some active management to encourage oak to get established. Again, this was yesterday, pictures of look how dense the foliage is already. Red maple in the middle, sugar maple on the ends, but they're really starting to block a lot of light. You'll also notice the sugar maple. Look at the branching. There's branches down way low because it has leaves that can tolerate very shaded conditions. So it's going to block a lot of light from getting through. Not to say that sugar maple and red maple are always bad, but when you're looking at your forest as a whole, if you want some areas to be oak dominated, then you may want to pick and choose and do management in the areas that might be best to maintain oak. Again, there's the oak canopy. Right now, still a lot of light coming through our oak canopies. Lots of other things out there. I just picked a few that I'm finding interesting. Serviceberry, nice, finely serrated, small teeth around the edge, and the buds are just broken. So they're usually about a half or almost a half, quarter to half inch long. A couple of our compound leaf things that you'd be finding out there. I don't know if Atlantis is breaking bud. Fortunately, I don't have much on the property, but I think it's going to jump here a little bit later. This is a hickory over here, cluster of leaves that have popped out of that bud at the tip, and then this is a clearly opposite ash, probably white ash in this part of the world. And right now, I'm really amazed at the variety of where beech is. This is a beech picture I took the same day as I took this picture. These are the buds, cigar-shaped long buds that have broken. And this thing has grown probably a foot already this year. Another tree 10 feet away, the bud hasn't broken. So you can find beech at all different stages right now. And then if you keep looking, it's another real big benefit of getting out in the woods and just seeing what you can find. You can find things like this. This is a showy orchid that I have only found one or two others on the property, and it was at the base of a dead ash tree. I don't know if there's any correlation there or not, but a beautiful little native orchid. If you keep looking, you might find things like this, which I just found. Anybody know what that is? Let's have some folks add to the chat window here. Any thoughts on that one? I am hoping I still have a signal because I've had some intermittent signal here. Julie, if you turn your picture on there, your camera on, maybe I'll know that somebody's out there and I'm not talking to myself here. That's a good sign. Jess is alive there, so I know somebody's out there. Yeah, it's American ginseng, and I put the label on it. Duh. I should have left that off. It popped. But yeah, American ginseng, we actually planted some seeds a few years back and don't have near as many ginseng as I have planted seeds over the years, but they're out there. And then finally, I'd almost given up on these. I know a lot of people were finding them, but I had a hard time finding morels on my property, but I haven't strayed far from the property. So the morel season is starting to wind down here, but it's been a pretty good year for most folks. And with that, I'm going to wrap up a little early so we can keep on time. I just wanted to acknowledge with this template on this graphic that we are doing a lot of work down here in Southeast Ohio on oak and oak management with partners. And the main partners are listed here at the top. The USDA is mainly the Natural Resource Conservation Service and the U.S. Forest Service, Division of Forestry, Division of Wildlife, Ohio State University Extension, and Central State are doing a lot. And if you're interested, I will post the link to this edition of the Woodland Journal. We actually did several articles on oak and oak management and our efforts down here. So if that's something you're interested in, the Ohio Woodland Journal is available. I'm not sure if this edition is posted on the Ohio Forestry Association site yet, but it should be shortly. So with that, I'll take a few questions, and Eric and Dave will be up here in a second. So I'm going to stop my screen share and let them start loading up while we're taking questions. Any questions at this point? Okay, I'm glad we got through that because I've had a heck of a time with internet instability. So that's
hey,
part
Dave,
of the reason.
there was one question way up in the chat, actually.
I did not see it, Jamie. If you can.
It is, okay. I think it was something, hold on, let me find it, but it was like they had
this
beech
one?
over their oak.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you find it?
So I have an area with beech and oak. Seedlings obviously competing for the sun, etc. Can I nip off the beech to help the oaks? You could. Beech is similar to maple in that it's pretty shade tolerant, so it will cast some pretty dense shade. So that is something that you could do, is just give the oaks a competitive advantage by cutting the beech back. Um, it's tough to make really good recommendations without seeing how big, how many, and what the actual conditions are. But certainly, if you've got oaks in direct competition with beech, um, it would not hurt to remove some of that beech and get a little more light to the oaks.
You got another one, Dave. What is the best way to remove small red maples? Okay to pull or need to use Roundup? Question mark.
Small
All
red.
about. Oh wait, somebody said knee high, but that might have been in reference to something else.
Okay. The best way to remove small maples is probably, you probably need to use some kind of herbicide. And I don't like to make herbicide recommendations on a webinar. I really like to talk to people and know their situation. Roundup is something that may or may not work, but I doubt it would work well with Roundup or with red maple. And we've had some experience with that in some of our research at the Vent and Furnace, right, Dave? Didn't work quite as well as we'd hoped. But when we apply herbicides to trees, a lot of times we're going to apply it to the stem of the tree, either with a cut surface treatment or with a hack and squirt, where we're actually making a pocket and putting a concentrated herbicide in it, or we may spray it on the bark. But depends on your situation. I'd really like to talk to you, Jen. So my email, I'm typing it in right now. And if you want to send me specifics, I'd be glad to try to help you. Um, because you got to be careful. If you're spraying the foliage of those red maples, you might do damage to the desirables. If you're doing a basil spray, you could get it on desirables as well. So we just want to be careful and make good recommendations.